Hey y'all, it's Dr. Know-It-All. So I am in the Miami airport, as you can see over there. I'm gonna flip it back around this way, however. You get the lovely gray wall or the cigar shop behind me. Anyway, I wanted to spend the time today, as we are still traveling. Yes, we were supposed to be home last night. The plane got delayed due to mechanical stuff, and then it got delayed again, and then we went out on the tarmac, and then they decided they weren't gonna do it, so they took us all an hour away to a hotel where we got to sleep for a whopping 6 hours and then had to get back up at 5:30 and start the whole thing over again. So anyway, hopefully, eventually we'll get home. You can see I'm pretty tired from all of this stuff. And I have been wearing an N95 mask, but I'm sort of in the corner right now, so I'm staying out of everybody's way. So just wearing the one mask right now. Anyway, what I wanted to talk about, all of this is sort of bringing to a head something that I've been thinking about for quite a while, which is that every time we go on a trip, we always do a calculus. And the calculus is expense and time and convenience. Wow, my fingers are really big. So anyway, you think about it like, okay, if you're gonna drive, you have to think about how much time it's going to take to drive someplace. So I'll take my parents' house as an example. It's about 9.5 hours from where we live-ish. It's a little bit longer with the Tesla, actually, because of the charging times. But anyway, so call it 9.5 hours. We could alternatively drive an hour to an hour and a half to the Atlanta airport, depending on traffic, get there 2 hours early, and then take a 2-hour flight to Washington, D.C., deplane, and take about a 45-minute either Uber or have my sister pick us up or something like that. So all told, it would probably take about 7 to 8 hours to do the trip from Atlanta to Washington, D.C., and then to my parents' house in Springfield. So the deal with that is that it never really makes a lot of sense because then there's expense involved also, and if you have a car, the only expense is either gas or electricity to fill it up and a little bit of wear and tear on the car itself. So the calculus never really works out. I suppose if I was flying all by myself and had to do it really quick and didn't really have time to get rested up and, because it's a long drive to do by yourself. I've done it before, it pretty well sucks. So anyway, all of that calculus means that essentially we usually drive anything that, of course, anything over water like what we did for this trip to Cancun, Mexico, you're kind of stuck at taking an airplane. So you don't really have that choice. So the reason why I'm titling this is Will Tesla Kill Short Haul Flights is because long haul flights, obviously, if you're flying A, over the ocean, or B, if you're flying from like Atlanta to Los Angeles, unless you have an awful lot of time on your hands, the calculus is pretty clear that the time savings and even the expense, because if you were taking a gas car, for example, across country with the price of gas, and it was just one human being driving, like it changes completely if it's a family, right? Then it actually becomes an interesting thing. But you could make a pretty good argument that if you get a good plane flight price, the cost of the gas and the wear and tear on the car, plus any hotels you have to get, because you're gonna have to get at least probably 2 hotels unless you're a lot younger than me and can just drive straight through by yourself. So anyway, the calculus sort of changes, and every person has their own, I guess, threshold for where they're like, I have to fly at this distance. Whereas if it's a shorter distance, I'll drive because driving is much more convenient. If we could have driven, like if this had all been over land and we'd had 2 1.5-hour flights, so let's say it would have been 12 to 15 hours of driving, it would have been way better for us to get up in the morning yesterday and drive our car 15 hours rather than the hell that we went through. Because, again, you have to deal with all the crap that you have to deal with at an airport too, like security and all that other stuff. So there's all those pieces that add into this, and flying is a very unpleasant experience unless, I guess if you're Elon Musk or somebody who has their own private airplane or something, it's probably not that bad. But for us, lumpen proletariat, flying is a horrible experience. And I don't know that it's ever going to get any better. So what I'm saying here, though, and what's going to change the calculus, I've been preambling up to this, is that it's also painful to drive. To drive for 9 or 10 hours or something is an unpleasant experience. It takes a lot of concentration. It's dangerous because you get tired, and et cetera, et cetera. So again, if you have 3 or 4 people and you can rotate things around, it becomes less bad, but it still kind of sucks being stuck in a car for all that time. So yeah, I can tell you can probably thinking, I know where he's going with this. So the deal is, what happens when robo-taxis arrive? And I think that is actually going to happen, right? I think that what we're seeing with the FSD beta 10.4, 10.5, 10.6, and now jumping to 10.8. I still have yet to drive it because we're still not home, but everybody else who's driven it says it's just another amazing jump forward. So let's just, it's a relatively small leap, but let's say in 4 years or 5 years, so by the mid to later, like 2025, 2027, somewhere in that range. So I'm not talking about a year from now. If Tesla actually gets this technology working and it gets approved, and it also then starts to get approved in other countries, like take the European Union, for example, where short-haul flights are de rigueur, right? Everybody does short-haul flights all over the place. And they put up, and believe me and Lane have done that, me and Misinformation have done short-haul flights in Europe, and it's pretty miserable there too, because they just treat you like cattle, and you just, you're being run all over the place. So it's no fun. So short-haul flights, the pain and the expense of a short-haul flight would be much, much, much bigger than if you could just call up a car or if you owned that car. So if you own the car, you don't have to pay anything extra for it, right? You just have to get to the charging stations. But if you could essentially get in the car and say it's a 10-hour drive, like to my parents' house, and so you go there and you're like, okay, get in the car, punch in their address, and then read a book, go to sleep, work on your computer, sit in the back seat, whatever you want to do, that you could do that for that period of time. You don't have anything to do with airports and all of that kind of mess. You don't have anything to do with all the security crap. You don't have anything to do with being on a giant bus full of people just packed into these places. So all of these things are major, major advantages that you would have, and you don't have the one significant disadvantage. Well, there's two disadvantages of driving. Number one is time. And of course, if time is absolutely critical to you, then you're always going to be one of those people who will be willing to pony up the price and the unhappiness of flying. But if time is not that critical issue, then money is the other one, and the pain of flying. Flying is no fun at all, but again, driving long distances is also no fun at all. But if you take away the pain of the driving long distances, you save on the money, and all you're expending then is time, and the time isn't even that bad, because essentially it becomes as if you were on a train or something going somewhere. So you're not being responsible for driving, so you can do a lot of things. You could actually conduct an entire 8-hour day of work from your car office, right, while you're driving down the highway, if you so needed to. So that really starts to change, right? I start to think about the fact that if and when this happens, I think, if robo-taxis become a real thing, or at the very least, if Teslas are approved to drive on freeways and in most cities without the intervention of a human being, which I really think can happen now I think that technologically they'll be ready by, I'm going to call it the end of 2022, so about a year from now. But I think that even legislatively or rules-wise within the United States, they'll be able to do this relatively soon. Now, Europe is going to be its own beast regulatory-wise, there we go. It's been a long couple of days. Europe will be its own beast, right? Everything always takes longer in Europe. But at some point, these cars will be approved, and at some point you'll be able to rent one of these. Just call it up and say, I want to drive from here to here, it doesn't matter where, and it will take you there, and you won't have to intervene. And at that point, when all of that happens, I really think that short-haul airlines, like those routes, and they're pretty sweet spot routes. The people, especially in Europe, really, really love those routes. But even in the US, Atlanta to Washington, D.C., Atlanta to Jacksonville, Florida, that's only like a 6-hour drive. Atlanta to Cincinnati, I don't know. You start talking about regional flights, things like that. I think that regional flight, the market for that will really collapse, because some people again will want to spend the money, go through the pain, because the extra time is super important to them. But most people will say, nah, not interested. I would rather do something that's easier on me. I would rather do something that I don't have to go through the pain of flying. I don't have to go through the expense of flying. Even if it's a robo-taxi, it's almost inevitably going to be cheaper than flying, especially if you have multiple people, right? So the calculus changes significantly if you have, your spouse and a child or two or something, or a bunch of friends or something, in which case there's a large expense to flying. And in that case, it's just a no-brainer, right? If you can get a car and it costs the same amount of money for one person or four, then you're going to take the car instead of flying. It's going to be a lot cheaper. So anyway, I really think that what's going to happen, again, I'm not saying this is going to happen next year, not going to happen the year after that. In the United States, we could start to see it happen by the 2026, 2027 range. In Europe, it could be another couple of years after that because regulatory approval could be very, very slow. But at some point, we're going to get to the part where it's sort of like taking a train, right? People used to take trains everywhere, but then planes became the better option most places because of time. And, even though it's more painful, there's a lot of time savings. But this is the same sort of thing that's going to happen. We're going to see EV cars, autonomous cars, kind of just come in and just completely disrupt this market, which has been in existence for 30 or 40 years now in a pretty consistent way. But I certainly did not enjoy the experience of flying. Poor Lane is over here really not enjoying the experience of flying. She's waving at me. She's like, we've had a rough couple of days. Anyway, and wearing the masks effect, you wouldn't have to do that in your car the whole way. All of this stuff with COVID, even that, I forgot to even add that, but with COVID and everything, of course, you don't have to deal with the fact that you've got hundreds of diseased people, potentially diseased people, all around you sharing your air that you would not have in a car. So there's many, many advantages to this. So again, I think technologically, Tesla's going to have full self-driving taken care of within a year, a calendar year from now. So end of 2022, that's my prediction, hold me to it. Now, again, that's feature completeness. It may not be perfect, but feature complete. And then regulatory approval could take another couple of years. But again, middle of this decade, I'm seeing the beginnings of this happening. And as it expands, it will start to eat into short-haul airplane flights. People will certainly use it locally, obviously. That'll be the obvious first case thing. Drive to work, drive back, drive to the bar so you can go drink and you don't have to worry about driving home, all of that kind of stuff. But this long haul thing will begin to take place. And as it does, you will see airlines will lose out on this market, and it's a very lucrative market. So I'll be very curious to see what happens. Flag this video for 2026 or something, and let's take another look at it. I think it'll be 2030 before it really plays out, but so another almost 10 years. But by the middle of the decade, we should start to see this happen. And the big first sign, of course, is that Tesla will be, we'll have the technology for full self-driving, and then we'll get approved for it. And then, they may also start licensing it to other auto manufacturers. And if they do that, then it'll happen even faster, because the more cars that are out there that can do this, the more potential for robo-taxis, the more potential for people that own a car that can drive them someplace. All of these things are going to sort of escalate on top of each other like a bunch of dominoes. So anyway, there you go. It's the day after Christmas. We've been traveling for 2 days. We had a pretty unmerry Christmas, unfortunately, but we're looking forward to seeing our human babies and our fur babies really soon. And in the meantime, I hope everybody had a lovely holiday season and you're getting a couple of days with family or friends or whatever you want to do, just to relax if nothing else. And I will talk to you all soon. Okay, bye-bye.